Good day. How are you? Amazing. Every day. Every day we got to take it in. It sometimes can be the littlest thing, but you need to make it feel like it is just the best. So, on that note, I wanted to talk about something that I always think about, which is how I grew up and where I am now. And I oftentimes get feedback asking specific questions about certain details, but I want to just go over some things. And I often refer to it as like Lower East Side Princess to Suburbia Reina. That's how I like to say it, because I feel that way. Growing up, I always felt like a penny short, a soulless shoe, a hole in my pants. I never felt like I had certain things that made me feel like I always feel like we didn't do without, and my grandparents always provided, but I just something about, I don't know how to explain it. I definitely felt like a pauper. But anywho, the story goes that my mom, she lived in Brooklyn, and when she was in Brooklyn, she was a genius. And I'm not just saying that because she was my mom. She was very smart. Her IQ was very high, and she ended up getting skipped 2 or 3 grades to eventually graduate high school right as she turned 15. And when this happened, because she was in a scene and influenced by older people, she met someone and she got married. And this person was very abusive to her. And not only were they abusive, they almost held her hostage in a sense. And she had no well-being with this person. And they really stifled who she could be. So she had to escape. So she ended up escaping this person. And she ran to New York City, to the East Village, also known as Alphabet City. And that's where she had a mutual friend with my father. And she became friends with my father. And they ended up falling in love. And as the story goes, they were always in love, right? To the very end. So some of the things that were interesting about growing up in Alphabet City, which I refer to as the Lower East Side, or LES. You might always hear me say LES, 6th Borough. But some of the things that were interesting to me is my mom refused to have any type of wealth outside of her artist life. She was sick, but she also wanted to be very independent. And my grandparents had a beautiful home in Brooklyn in which they sold and moved to North Carolina. They were always, my grandfather had a PhD level, my grandmother worked in the college, and they always had this affluence about them, going to amazing parties, traveling, and they definitely took care of me and my sister, where they had a part-time custody of us. So we would always see one side of the world versus the other. So every time I would go home, I would, wonder why my mom didn't want to raise the bar in her own life. But maybe her illnesses kept her in a way that she felt she couldn't. And the thing is, my neighborhood, yes, we had homeless people. Yes, we had junkies and drug dealers and winos and things of that nature. But I loved my neighborhood. Everything about my neighborhood was amazing. I remember I used to work after school in the bodega downstairs, and it was Jose in the morning and Muhammad at night. And I used to have so many amazing memories of just being in my neighborhood and all the great people that I used to be friends with. And I loved my neighbors. Like, you could just ring on the bell and you had so many friends in your building. And it was just a different world. It really was. And so anytime I think back, I always remember my life being like like an urban princess. I feel. And any of my old school friends who are listening, I know y'all felt the same way. Just something about that vibe was crazy amazing. Now, my dad, he was a super, which means he was a superintendent of different buildings. He worked for like 3 different companies and overall had 25 buildings that he would maintain, clean, be the handyman for all the time. So he was always working, trying to just do his thing. But then he was also a musician. He would play at CBGBs. And I remember when I was a little girl, he would oftentimes take me there, and he would perform with like the Beastie Boys, the Ramones, Blondie, and New York Dolls, and others. And he would just bring his guitar and ask, and they would say, yeah, come up on stage, and they would pay him. And he had a saying like daytime hard worker and nighttime hard rocker. It was just kind of silly, and he would always have these funny sayings. But the one thing that really I saw with my father was he always worked. He always had like 5 jobs. Always. He could be doing anything: a bouncer, a handyman, exterminator, plumber, an electrician, everything. And I remember even one time getting teased that a kid in school said to me, "Oh my God, Fanny, your father knocked on my door last night and he was like, roach busters." And he made this whole joke and the whole class started laughing. But then I was like, joke's on you, my father's an exterminator and you have roaches, right? So that was kind of like, the things kids do. But I was always proud. I was always proud of my parents because my mom, she was sick, so she did the best she could, but she was an artist, an incredible painter. She could do so many things, understand different languages, paint, a musician. She just had so much talent. And they were completely in love. And what I saw in their love is this type of groupie love. Like, she was always infatuated with my dad and loving him, and he was her biggest fan, and it always worked that way. But my mom would sit me down and she would make it clear. Like, she would say, I don't want you to be serious with anybody. I want you to date different people. And I remember being like 8 or 9 years old or 8 years old, and they got married. And even then, she was very serious about living your life, being independent, not being, dependent to anyone because of what happened to her when she was 15. And she also made me promise her that I wouldn't even get married until I was 21. Like, that was like, I know nowadays people don't get married till they're like 30. I get that. But back then it was a little different. And she was really adamant about living my own life. And my father would work so hard and he would get paid in cash. And he would do so many different things. Well, in his main job, he got paid, I guess, in his check, right? But he would also have these side jobs. And any of his side jobs, he would take the cash, and in my apartment, there was like a socket. It was fake. He would take it out, and there was a hole in the wall, and he would put all the money in that hole in the wall. And that's another story that we'll talk about they took all that money one day and bought a house of their dreams. Anywho, that's for another future blog. But for right now, his whole thing was he worked so hard so that my mom can have anything that she wanted. And unfortunately, she died young and he went through a tragedy and then he passed away. So, I always utilize those experiences to my own life, right? Well, the funny thing is that I think back, one time, I remember I was in the street waiting for my mom. We were going to go grocery shopping, and this guy came up to my dad and was like, "Oh, I want to marry your daughter." And my father was always like, "Oh, another one? All right, well, let me ask you a question. Which daughter?" And so then the guy was like, "Oh," and when he went to speak, my father cut him off, and he was like, "Well, first of all, you need a minimum of a college education, some type of degree, a pension. Do you own your home?" And I couldn't believe how he drilled the guy. And it was just some guy in my neighborhood, but it made me laugh because my father was very serious. And he sat me down and he explained to me that he worked hard, and I could see him physically working hard. And he said, "Fanny, I have no benefits. I have no insurance. I have no pension. I have nothing. I don't want you to ever have a situation where you have nothing. You should never, ever, ever, as a woman or as a wife, feel that you have nothing." And I looked at him and he was so serious. He was. And he would say, a person's looks will fade, but their pension will only continue to grow interest. And I said, "But Dad, you can't marry for money. You have to marry for love." And he would laugh at that. But I had to really understand where they came from, right? Like, they were old school and times were different. And before we go on, I'm going to take a short break and we'll be right back to continue this tale, this novella. Welcome back. Oh my goodness. So my dad, he was an old school man, but he was a rocker. So it was weird. He was a rocker that was old school and a Mr. Fix-It. Well, anywho. So he had all these philosophies about, trying to be ahead, education, and I get it. My mom was like the complete opposite. She was like, live your dreams, carry a bag with you with all your life belongings and just do whatever makes you feel right. Anywho, during those periods of time, before my parents were deceased, around that or later time of me, now I'm like in my 18, I'm in my about to enter into my adulthood, right? And me and some beautiful friends of mine were like, let's go on a boat cruise around the city, one of these boat jams. And I was like, let's do it. So me and my sister, some friends, we got all, beautified, and we went. We had an amazing time. And one of my sister's friends, who is now a very dear friend of mine and now a cousin, and I'll tell you why. So she was like, listen, my cousin's gonna come pick us up. This is my sister's friend. And we gotta go meet him at this club called Fantasia. So me and my sister were like, all right, let's go. He's gonna drive us home. Let's go. So we went. And we're like, oh, okay, where's your cousin? Whatever, ready to go home. And all of a sudden, this guy shows up, and I look at him, and I swear, he had this Mario Lopez look, like the dimple in the cheek, the eyes, like the AC Slater from Saved by the Bell in the college years. He had this look that was so handsome. Like I almost fell down. And I was like, I'm never lost for words. I am never lost for words. But right at that moment, I was like, habada. So anywho, we get in the car, and I am just like looking at his eyes I'm in the back seat, looking at his eyes in the mirror, like, oh my God, this guy's so good looking. We get home. He drives us home. We say goodbye to our friends. We leave. And my mom was outside on the stoop smoking a cigarette. Oh gosh. And she's like, who's the cutie? And I was like, oh my God, Mom, shut up, get in the house. So that night and the next day, I called every guy in my phone book, every single guy. And I'm not even kidding. I had so many different male friends that, maybe in their mind, I was their girl, but in my mind, they were just my friend. And I called them all, and I was like, listen, we can no longer talk. Lose my number, forget I exist. I'm in love. And one of them was like, what are you talking about? Like, you're my girlfriend. I was like, no, I'm not. I don't want anything to do with you. Goodbye. And my mom was like, oh, don't put all your eggs in one basket. And my father's like, who is this guy? Does he have a career? And I'm cracking up because I don't even know really anything about him. Just, I was head over heels. But guess what? I don't hear from him for 2 years. And I keep asking his cousin, like, oh, where is he? And she's like, oh, he's in Jersey, or he's this, or he's that. Like, but he's never around. So life continues, and my mom passes away, the World Trade Center, all these things happen. And I end up with my PIC, that's my partner in crime, my PIC. We end up getting an apartment. And I love her to this day, one of my sweetest friends. And we are just doing it. Club hopping. We're living the best life. And one day, my dear friend says, hey, come over. So-and-so's here. And I was like, who's that? Let's go. We go. And her mom was like, come, he's here. And I see this guy in the living room. And I don't recognize him. It's been 2 years. And actually, no, it's been more than 2 years. I was 18, now it's 2002. Look at me doing the math. And, and I do payroll and accounting. So anyway, I see him, and then it dawns on me who he is. And me and him start talking, and he's like, hey, what are you doing tomorrow? And I'm like, well, tomorrow I gotta go to work, and blah, blah, blah. And he was like, all right, I'll pick you up. I was like, really? Okay. So then the next day I go to work, And as I'm leaving, who is outside my job in his car? This guy. And I'm like, oh my God, like, what are you doing here? And he's like, I told you I'd pick you up. I didn't believe it. I was like, okay. We have so much fun. We go hang out. We go have dinner. Just a nice time. That was April 17th, 2002. And I consider that our first date. And then at the end of the night, and let me tell you how crazy he was. He was living in Queens. He would drive me all the way to the Bronx. He would go over here, go over there. And he was like, what are you doing tomorrow? And I'm like, oh, I don't know. I want to get my nails done. I got to go to work. He was like, all right, I'll pick you up. I was like, okay. Every single day, I swear, every single day, he would say, what are you doing tomorrow? What are you doing tomorrow? Me and him were together every day. Every single day. And then one day we went to the mall and he was like, we were looking at different things. And he was like, well, what are you? And we're in the car now and we're on the roof of the mall parking lot. And he's like, you dropped something? And I look over and he's bent down at the right side of the car, passenger side door. And I was like, what? And he is kneeling and he looks up and he's like, what are you doing for the rest of your life? And he had a ring. And I was like, what you doing? What's going on? And let's do a time check. It's August 17th, 2002. Our first date was April 17th. And I'm like, April, May, June, July. Oh, it's been like 5 months. I'm like, he's like, well, will you marry me? And I was like, yes. Oh my God, yes. Let's do it. And then I did a mental check. I promised my mother I wouldn't get married until after I was 21. I was 22. So, now, do I recommend this for everyone? No. I tell all my girlfriends who are young, my little mentees that I mentor and coach, wait till you're 26, travel the world, make sure you have your Louis, make sure you have your red bottoms, do your life, do everything you need, and then get your master's, PhD, then. But this is my journey. So, me and him, we go get our license September 17th, 2002. And then we eloped September 20th, 2002. So, we've been married for 18 years. And hands down was the best decision of my life. Let me tell you something. I don't know where I would be without this foundation, this strength in my life. And if you know me, you know him. That's my husband. And he's so incredible. And everyone's always like, oh my God, you got married after 6 months. Oh no, blah, blah. We've been together 18 years. I've been with this man longer than I've known anyone in my life, right? In a sense. I've lived with him the longest. I have annoyed him his whole life. And sometimes he'll say that, oh, you're annoying. I'm like, well, you asked me to marry you, right? But it's been such a pleasure and a dream come true. And then, now we live all the way in Jersey, in the sticks. I left my Lower East Side, and now I'm in a Suburbia. And it's crazy because, have you ever seen the movie The Burbs? That movie, you know that movie, The Burbs? I remember watching that like, oh, that's crazy. Well, I don't live in the Burbs. Well, I do, but I don't live in that movie. But like, I have amazing neighbors, like really loving people that live in my little area. I know everybody in my town. My kids go to great schools. There's never been a moment that I've been married that I went without something I needed. My husband has provided like everything. And I feel like I checked both boxes. My mother's, be an artist, have a dream, live your life, tap dance, dance in public, sing in the rain. All her artistic side. And then my father, does he have a pension? Does he have this? Does he have finances? It's the funniest thing. Even when my husband asked my father, he was like, can I marry your daughter? I had no, like, it was just like the funniest thing. My father was like, yeah, of course. Like, instant. When my husband met my grandparents, I think he was, listen, no disrespect to any of my cousins or my sister, but I think he was like their favorite grandchild over me. And you know, secretly I was their favorite. So, something about it. He has taught me things too, I must say. And this is why I feel like a queen. I remember on our third date, and it was specifically our third date, I was like, I'm gonna dress sexy. I go out to see him and he was like, I don't want to be rude, but can you pull your shirt up and your skirt's too short? Don't you respect yourself? And I was like, how dare you? Went upstairs, changed my clothes. But he's old school, like my father, like my grandfather. And he feels you could be whatever you want in your house, but when you're in the street, have respect. And I'm like, okay, because I love it. And, you know, that doesn't mean I'm not who I am. I am who I am. Let me tell you, you can't hold fire in your hand. But my husband manages to hold this flame, right? In his heart. And this has been an incredible journey. And this is my little novella. I just wanted to share something like a little story of love and life. I always throw in the comedy and the full circle. Full circle is at the end of the day, whatever you're doing, it has to be your dream. It has to make you happy. You can't look at your partner and say, oh, you're not making me happy. It has to come from inside of you. But it can only come from inside of you if you love yourself, right? That's the true meaning right there. Because I tell you, I've been through so many obstacles and challenges, but I'm like the happiest person you could meet. And I have days that I'm like, I'm having a bad day. But I'm still the happiest because that comes from within me. I have to find, when someone's like, hey girl, how are you? I'm like, amazing. Everything is great. Because it is, right? I'm alive and life is amazing. Today is my anniversary. Today is 18 years with the man of my dreams. 3 beautiful sons. And by the grace of God. With that said, that is my journey for today on this Fannytastic Life. Thank you so much for sharing it with me. And I'll see you next time. Don't forget, you can always check me out on fannytasticlife.com. Take care.